There is a garden growing in Boyle Heights. It isn't filled with plants and flowers like bleeding hearts, devil's backbone, Cupid's darts, angels' trumpets, fairy bells, lamb's ears, hens and chicks, earth stars, goat pipes, mouse tails, sneezeweeds, naked ladies, or sundews. No, instead it's filled with jardineros, meseras, albañiles, carpinteros, and electricistas, plomeros, pintoras, soldadores, trabajadores de la construcción, cocineras, meseras, recepcionistas, peluqueras, limpiadoras, cuidadoras de niños. They're nurturing love in a place where few could imagine anything could grow. Come inside this garden, a garden of second chances, a garden with no borders, a garden with a circle of compassion that encompasses all, including those who choose not to enter. Come inside this garden of men and women and children who, despite all odds, bloom. Some from the outside demonize this garden and the plants within, calling them vermin, poison, gang members, throwaway plants, evasive weeds. Instead of life-giving water, alcohol, fast foods, and drugs try to flood the garden. Lead and pollution poisoning posing as fertilizer threaten to sicken the garden. Missing books and a lack of resources in the schools threaten the children. From a distance of privilege and disgust, they watch the suffering, existing for no other reason than man-made poverty, government redline neighborhoods, a cradle-to-prison pipeline needing victims to fill its prison cells. In any other part of the city, gang members would have a different name. We would call them who they are, children. But the garden is strong, built on the shoulders of immigrant women. They know how to plant. They know how to nurture. They know that every person is divine. And in the garden, all who enter bloom.
So as I was reading this book, I was like, one of the comparisons that came to mind was Bloga, right? And his, his love sonnets, and how, I've always said, like, after 5 sonnets, you think, okay, we get it, you're in love, and we can move on. But all of his sonnets are so distinct and beautiful that you're just completely captivated and you stay with the collection. And for me, when I first read his collection, I was just wowed that every sonnet was so different, but yet obviously his muse was his wife, and that's why the collection was created. Here, I compared it. I'm comparing this collection to that because you stayed, like, you clearly have a muse. You have a very specific, inspiration here, and you were so consistent about it throughout each and every poem. So yeah, I just wanted to talk about that process for you, because I find that's got to. I mean, I haven't done something. I haven't done it. I don't think I will. I don't know. Maybe one day I will, but I find it to be, that can be really overwhelming. So can you talk to us a little bit about this?
Sure. Well, I mean, that's high praise. I mean, for every Latino, especially, they're always looking at that just to, to court someone with those poems. So,
right.
Like, it's well read. So it's true too. It's, each sonnet, it really changes you in a different way. This one was interesting because what happened was that I'm trying to honor the women who founded Proyecto Pastoral, and I've been on the board for over 30 years, and so I knew these women, over almost half of my lifetime, and many were passing. So the idea was originally was to write a history of the organization. And as I read more poetry, I thought maybe a better way of handling this is to do poetry about it, because I really wanted to get their essence. And I felt like if I wrote a history, likely no one would read it, they would see it as history. And here they could get bite-sized, ways of entering into Proyecto Pastoral. And I wanted it in Spanish and English. So the Spanish is first and then the English, because I wanted to first honor the community, be accessible to them. So, and I was very clear that it wasn't going to be very flowery, or I was going to really try to do poetry in a way that was very accessible. So that was primarily the thing. I've gone to all these fancy schools and I've, gone to all these places, but my greatest teachers really were the women that were doing this work in Boyle Heights.
Can you talk about that really briefly, though?
Yeah.
People may not be really familiar, just in case.
Yeah.
It's Proyecto Pastoral.
Yeah. So Proyecto Pastoral was founded in 1986. Father Greg Boyle, who, wrote the preface to the book of poetry, he and a group of women, in 1986, a lot is happening. Immigration issues are at the forefront. They've just passed the Immigration Reform Act, where people, millions of people are going to get amnesty. And there's also lots of enforcement. So there's a lot of immigration activity that's happening in the neighborhood.
Not at all we're familiar with.
Yes. It feels like a deja vu.
I know, it is,
and, people are really frightened in the community. Things are happening. Salvadoreños are coming up. A lot of Central Americans are coming up. So there was a big sanctuary movement that was happening at the time. So, there's lots going on in Los Angeles. And that influx, people are trying to, how do we protect these people? And La Placita was thinking about, okay, we're going to be a sanctuary. And then Dolores Mission in Boyle Heights also was considering that. But Father Greg did something that was kind of unique. He had he would talk to the community, and the community in general was comprised of women. The women were the ones that were doing a lot of the work. And the primary reason for that was that they wanted to create a safe place for their children to grow up. Boyle Heights, the history of it is really extraordinary. It's always had a Mexican identity, but there had always been a Chinese immigration, Jewish immigration, Russian Jews would go there, Japanese Americans. You had immigration coming up. And the reason for that is the redlining of Los Angeles.
Mm-hmm.
It was one of the few places where, regardless of who you were, you could live there. You could find a place there. In other parts, unless you were Caucasian, you couldn't buy a place, or you couldn't be part of that. And so in that moment of immigration, poverty, like all of these types of things, these women, along with Father Greg, start thinking about how are we going to even invite this new influx of immigrants that are coming in. And what they decide is, unlike La Placita and other sanctuary movements that were only focusing on Salvadoreños or Central Americans, we're going to invite anyone that needs help. We will open the church to them, which is a profound statement because the church itself gets lots of criticism for that, because they wanted the focus to be only on Central Americans. But as immigrant women, they knew that everyone had to be taken care of. Father Brendan, after June 6th of last year, he gave a talk in front of all the press. Karen Bass is there, and he goes, Todos Somos Sagrados, all are sacred. Either we're all sacred or no one is sacred. And that really resonated with the idea of what the women were teaching us.
Mm-hmm.
And it was something that I had to capture. And I felt like that was the essence of really what the work of what the women are doing. And they're really extraordinary people. And we've lost some of them, and still some remain. But I had to capture that because I was afraid, like, if we didn't write it, no one would write it. Yeah. And that all that history would be lost.
Did you start writing this collection after that statement by Father Brendan, or
No.
did you already start writing these poems?
Yeah, so surprisingly, I had gotten accepted into a master's fine arts program at the Institute of American Indian Arts, and the executive director of Proyecto Pastoral says, well, why don't you write the history of Proyecto? And that's where I started thinking about writing the history. But then I thought, I'm going to get it wrong, and because it's such a complex place, and I felt like a better tool of capturing the women would be through poetry. And so that's why I started doing that. So that was already 2 years. And then June hits of last year. And that's when the title,
There's your title.
That's the title.
What's your title? the Spanish versions come first, right? In the placement, or at least in the order of the collection, and how that was important to you. I think for many of us, when we read the translation of anything, the original language is over here, and then the right side or the other side has English, and it's all in English. Some of your poems don't do that. And this is one of those poems where, like, the third stanza, when I first got to it, I was expecting to be the translation of jardineros, like gardeners, right? I was expecting to see meseras, which is like waiters or waitresses. I was expecting to see these, English words for what you had on the left side. And that did not happen.
Yeah.
So you wanted us to see this. You didn't want to translate this third stanza, and you didn't want to translate some things. Can you talk about that a little bit as to why did you make that conscious choice? What did that conscious choice mean for you? What does it mean for the collection?
It's really an act of resistance.
Okay.
Because I wrote the poems in English first, and I want people, especially if you're monolingual English, I want you to stretch. I want you to get out of your comfort zone and like get into what it is to be in this community. So, most people now in Boyle Heights are bilingual. Some will be monolingual Spanish, but so when they'll, if you're Latino, you'll read the book and then you'll see yourself, because it'll have more meaning to you in Spanish than it will in English.
Well, you have poems called Sofia, Esperanza, Socorro. They're very specific to, I'm assuming, some women named these, these. Yeah. Did you share these poems of Sofia, Esperanza?
No, I did. I'm not.
You did?
Yeah, I interviewed them.
Okay.
I interviewed all the women.
Okay.
So the idea was to keep a record of like who they are. So we have these interviews of them, and some of them have passed. So it's really but some of their children have.
Okay.
Which is really kind of powerful. So I'm kind of like a little bit nervous as to what they think about them. But it was all. That's what I write in the back, is like I asked for a lot of forgiveness and grace. That if I didn't capture it right, or if I said something that it was all with the intention of the love of the organization, and really trying to portray the women in the best light possible. Because in the environment that we find ourselves in now, where especially Latinos are just vilified wrongly, I wanted this to be a counterweight and a counter narrative to all of the hate and really cruelty that is happening right now. That I wanted to ensure that these women were honored, and so I asked for a lot of grace.
Long after we're gone, our poems will live on, and the people that we have written about will also live on in these pages. And so, like, I think you've immortalized Socorro, and you've immortalized Sofia and Esperanza, and all the women in the collection. And so I'm going to ask Ashley if you could read Socorro, because when I got to Socorro, the poem, it took me a little bit out in a good way, because it's a prose poem.
Yes.
And so, again, I believe it's the only, if I'm not mistaken, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, the only one that's a prose poem. So when I got to it, I was like, oh, we're doing something different here.
Yes.
So I love being surprised. And so if you don't mind reading Socorro, it's on page 103.
So just to give you a little bit of, so I took a prose poetry class from Jose Hernandez Diaz.
Oh, yeah.
So I definitely have to tip my hat to him. And I've always been haunted by this story, because Proyecto Pastoral, they are the only nonprofit that provides housing for immigrant women that are over 55 years of age. And an impetus for it, that the community kind of asked for it, was they had found a woman underneath a bridge. So it's kind of a common, unfortunately, it's a common thing that you will find bodies, and you won't know it. So that's kind of the background of this. Socorro. I want to scream from frustration, but no sound escapes. I want to shake sense into a city that forgets to feel, but my hands are seemingly tied together on my lap because as much as I try to move them, they are immovable. All I can do is read that the police are investigating yet another discovery of a human body under the 4th Street Bridge in downtown Los Angeles. She certainly didn't fall from the structure. According to the LA police, the female body was discovered around 9:50 p.m. I try my best to raise my voice to announce the crime to the world, but I feel helpless. Who was she? Some say she was an immigrant from Guatemala. Others say she was an unhoused Mexican-American who had lost her apartment to rent increases in Boyle Heights and had tried to find shelter under the bridge. La pobre viejecita no tenía a nadie con quien confiar. Who was she? She must have screamed for help. But no sound was heard in the concrete tomb. A tear falls from my eye and lands in a pool of water formed from El Niño rains. She was a mother, a sister, and a daughter to any one of us. Homicide detectives arrive on the scene to investigate. The age and identity of the victim are not immediately known, though she is presumed to be in her 70s.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, this collection, another thing that I was kind of like wondering, in some of these poems, you take on the voice of these women, right? There's these persona poems. And I find persona poems a challenge just in general as a writer. And I think I've done it a couple of times, but where I've taken on the voice of a man and, or something else. And it's a bit of a challenge. How was that? Do you feel the same way? Do you find that it was a challenge for you to take on the persona, the voice of these women, or?
Yes, it was very challenging, but I know these women. I've been kind of like over the last over 30 years, being on the board and meeting someone like Paul Hernandez, and others, just really, they're such incredible people that you kind of like get, you feel their essence, and they are really just incredible people. So that, in a sense, after I would interview some of them, I could really kind of transform into them and try to just give their voice, try to get out of the way in a sense of who they were. And so I felt like a lot of this poetry, I have to take myself out of it and then replace other people and try to do my best to be as humble and without ego, to really express what I want to convey.
You say you didn't consider yourself a poet. I have to ask you now, do you see yourself as a poet now after going through this process?
I do.
Okay.
I do because what I've learned, because I teach a class to it's a creative writing class to some students who want to go to law school, and so it's called LEAP. I'm on the board of LEAP, and it's an organization that is dedicated to bringing in students. They might be DACA students or formerly incarcerated people that really want to go to law school. So they're in college, and now they're applying to law school. And so I teach this class, and my first question to them is, okay, how many of you are poets? And I might get one or two or three, and I say that the real answer is that you're all poets. And it's an interesting question, because why don't we call ourselves poets? Like, if you were to write a love letter to, someone you care about, of course you'd write poetry, right?
Oh, yeah.
So, of course we're all poets.
Yeah.
But for some reason, we kind of like identify ourselves as what we're not. And so the process has been really transformative for me, in a sense of like giving myself grace to say, of course I'm a poet. Like, why did I not think I was a poet? Like, who would tell me that I'm not? and why did I internalize that?
Yeah.
So I think a lot of that, the women are teaching that, to think in a perspective of abundance, even in the most difficult of circumstances. They didn't see that. They saw the power of love to really conquer even the most difficult, challenging of places. And, again, they're tremendous teachers. So, and they have so much to say. And so that's why, at least for me, like, I had to write this book. It wasn't, I had no idea what was going to happen of it, but I had to write the book. Because if I didn't, I knew their voices would be lost.
You have a translator here, and I'm curious about translators. When I talk to translators, they say how hard it is. And so you worked with Javier, and I'm curious, did you always agree on the translation?
No, not at all. He's Argentine. I'm sure Argentina.
Oh.
So, but the beautiful part about this book is that it's also a reflection of how Proyecto Pastoral operates, because everyone gave something. So, like Jose Ramirez, he donated the beautiful cover that I think really sells the book. And then, Javier, he donated a service. He is the translator for our all of our board meetings, and he translates for the community. So he really knows, kind of the Boyle Heights community and the Proyecto Pastoral community and the Lawrence Mission community. So he offered, he said, I'll translate for free.
Wow.
So really incredible. So everyone, like all the proceeds of the book go to Proyecto Pastoral. Everybody is kind of like giving of themselves, just like the women gave of themselves. And it's interesting that it's like, it's 4 men that are coming together to kind of honor the women, and I think that's particularly important because of, you were saying about these movements that happen. Generally what happened is that the men are the ones that get, kind of like all the credit, or they get the labels, like
the spotlight.
The spotlight, and it's the women that are doing all the work.
Yeah.
So I think that's particularly fascinating about this book, how this all came together. And Javier, he would translate the book, but sometimes he'd put like an Argentine word, or he would translate, and then he and I would just fight, just like, but in a really lovely way. I mean, we became very good friends through the whole process of putting this book together. And I wanted to make sure that, like you, I spoke Spanish at home, but I wasn't really educated in it. So, like heritage language speakers, we need to be careful in terms of like how we translate Spanish. So I wanted to be, I wanted to honor Spanish as much as possible. So it was easy for me to like pull somebody in to help me with the translation. But we would definitely fight over it.
Oh, that's awesome. I love that. I mean, that is actually, I got a feeling, I was reading this, I was like, there had to be some disagreement.
Oh, yeah.
Who do you read? Who have you read? Just not just necessarily for this collection as a source of inspiration. What are some of your go-to?
So I've been given the privilege of going to the Institute of American Indian Arts in Santa Fe, New Mexico, get my master's in fine arts. And so I get in contact with people like M.S. Red Cherries. She wrote Mother. She just won the American Book Award. And it's an incredible book of poetry. And I have to kind of tip my hat to her in terms of her book of poetry is not poetry. For her, it's a way of telling stories. Like as an indigenous person, like that's how she wanted to tell stories. But in a capitalist system, in order to commodify it and be able to sell it, they had to call it poetry. But for her, she didn't. She was like, this is who I am. And if you read her book, Mother, it's very, it tells a story. And it tells the story of indigenous people in such a way that you wouldn't be able to get it any other way. And so that was an inspiration for at least trying to do this with this book, because some people were just saying, oh, this isn't really poetry. So then lately Long Soldier, who wrote Whereas, and she's coming out with her new book. She's incredible too because I interviewed her for Chapter House. I'm the editor for Storyteller's Corner, which is part of Chapter House. And I asked her, what is poetry to you? And she said, poetry is so many things. So for me, poetry is when I look out my window and I see the grass moving in the wind. So that's her poetry. So then, it permitted me to kind of like give myself permission to do this and call it poetry. And then Jose Hernandez Diaz, his books are really great. His prose poetry is really wonderful. And he's just a very exciting poet. And then I read a lot of Luis Rodríguez. He came out with a book in Spanish and English, which was kind of the first of its kind that was published in Mexico. So I've read his work, and and another person that's extraordinary, who's a Mexican poet, his name is Balam Rodrigo, and Balam Rodrigo has written over 50 poetry books. He's almost, I consider him like a Pablo Neruda or Octavio Paz, but he's not getting the recognition that he deserves. But he wrote a book called the Central American Book of the Dead, which is a palimpsest of using the book, A Short History of the Destruction of the Indies. And he uses that as the basis for writing about immigrants that are coming from Central America through Mexico into the United States. And so all of his poems give voice to those migrants and really what their stories were and the ideas that many of them passed. And so the book is a way of honoring them and helping their spirits return home.
So I'm going to ask you to read, one of your favorite poems to close out the show, because I've been selfish in asking you to read the poems I wanted you to read. But I want you to read now.
Cool.
Which one do you like? Which one is it?
Open your heart. Why do we close our hearts when we have so much? Men walking the streets shirtless without a home. An elderly woman riding the bus behind the driver, seeking safety so she can sleep. Children living under an underpass as Teslas driving to their mansions in Pasadena, San Marino, and Santa Monica. Where's the compassion? How about in Boyle Heights? A migrant knocks on the door of Dolores Mission Church, seeking sanctuary. A priest welcomes him. I have no place to stay, says the man with weathered hands and tired eyes. You could sleep on a cot in the church, says the priest. Would you like some food and a place to take a shower too? Unsure how to answer, the man paused as he set down his backpack and sought the priest's advice. I can't pay for this, Agnes. I've been walking for miles, working whenever I can, with little to show. How can I repay you? The priest took in a deep breath and responded, Our community is like a heart that does not yet know the limits of its love. We think and act as if it is limited to what we have already done. But you show us that there is more to do. You show us that we can do better. You show us that love is limitless. You have much to offer, and we are blessed to receive it. The priest went on, Thank you for opening our hearts. The man smiled, picked up his backpack, and walked in.
Thank you so much for this, and you did an amazing job for honoring these women. So gracias. Thank you for being here. Gracias.
Thank you for interviewing me. It was so lovely to do this.
I know. This is great. Awesome.